Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy my video, please click the like button and share the video. It is the only way the YouTube algorithms really notices me. I will be very grateful to you. The ghost I left in my bedroom closet. Scary story, published by Scare Fiction. Read for you by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1. The Return. Lily Dawson hadn't planned on returning to the place she had spent years trying to forget. Yet here she was, standing in the driveway of her childhood home in rural Pennsylvania, her suitcase heavy in one hand and the weight of old memories in the other. The house loomed in front of her, untouched by time, but somehow smaller than she remembered. Her breath hitched in her chest as she turned the key in the lock, pushing the door open to the familiar scent of dust and neglect. The house had been empty since her estranged mother passed, and Lily hadn't stepped foot inside since she was 17. New York, with its noise and anonymity, had become her refuge. She had built a life far removed from this place, leaving behind the ghosts of her past, or so she thought. But standing in the darkened hallway, the silence of the house pressed in on her like a familiar weight, tugging at memories she had buried deep. Lily sighed and made her way upstairs, her feet creaking on the old wooden steps. She hadn't expected her mother's death to hit her so hard, but the house felt emptier without her, like it was missing its heartbeat. Her bedroom door groaned as she pushed it open. Everything was as it had been, frozen in time: her old bed, the faded wallpaper, the closet in the far corner. The sight of the closet sent a chill skittering down her spine. She hesitated. Why did she feel such an unease about a simple closet? Shaking it off, she got to work clearing the dust from the room, unpacking her things. As she tossed a sheet into the laundry bin, she glanced back at the closet. The door was ajar, just a sliver. She frowned. She could have sworn she'd closed it. She walked over, closed it fully, and turned a knob, making sure it was shut tight. That night, after a fitful few hours of sleep, the nightmares came. She was back in the house as a child, playing hide and seek, but something wasn't right. There was always someone watching her. She could feel their gaze on her back, their breath against her skin. In the dream, she turned to look at the closet door. It was open. A dark figure stood just beyond the threshold, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't make out the face. Lily jolted awake, heart pounding, sweat dampening her skin. The room was silent, bathed in moonlight. She looked toward the closet. The door was ajar again. This time, she didn't get up to close it. Chapter 2. Unsettling Presence. Lily lay in bed, staring at the closet door, which now stood slightly ajar. She told herself it was the old house settling doors, shifting, floors creaking, but her heart raced with an inexplicable dread. She forced herself to turn over, away from the closet, willing sleep to take her again. But when the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, she was still wide awake. The image of the open door burned into her mind. The next day, she threw herself into cleaning, hoping the busy work would silence her growing anxiety. Her mother had kept everything: old photos, letters, trinkets that hadn't seen the light of day in decades. As she sifted through the boxes in the attic, Lily felt a cold draft, a chill that seemed to follow her no matter where she went in the house, always stronger near her bedroom closet. She rubbed her arms and shook her head. "You're imagining things," she muttered to herself. Exhaustion, grief. It had to be. Still, the flickering lights in the hallway and the sudden crash of a picture frame hitting the floor made her stomach tighten. The house felt wrong, like it was watching her, waiting. Later that afternoon, she called her brother, Ethan. His voice was as steady and unmoved as ever. "It's an old house, Lil. You know how it is. Things creak, things break. You're just tired. Mom's passing hit you harder than you think." Lily clenched her jaw, staring at the broken picture frame, the family portrait now lying face down on the floor. I don't know, Ethan. It's more than that. There's something off here. The closet door. You're overthinking it, Ethan interrupted, his tone dismissive. Look, take a couple of days. Get some rest. You'll see. It's all in your head. She hung up, frustrated, but not surprised. Ethan had always been like that, rational to a fault. But Lily knew deep down that something was different. Something had always been different about this house. That night, the dreams returned. This time, she was 8 years old again, playing hide and seek. She slipped into the closet, holding her breath as she waited for Ethan to find her. But when she opened her eyes, she wasn't alone. There, in the shadows, stood a figure silent, unmoving, watching her from the dark. Lily woke up with a start, her breath shallow, the room cold. The closet door was open, wider this time. Chapter 3. The Closet Secrets. Lily sat up in bed, her eyes fixed on the closet door. It was wide open now, the darkness inside seeming to pull at her like a living thing. A shiver ran down her spine as she swung her legs over the edge of the bed. The cold air wrapped around her like an icy hand. She hesitated for a moment before standing, her bare feet touching the cool wooden floor. Slowly, she crossed the room, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached for the closet door, half expecting to feel something, someone, reach out from the shadows. But nothing moved. She flicked on the overhead light, the sudden brightness making her blink. The closet was empty, the same as always. And yet, it wasn't. As she stepped closer, her gaze caught something tucked away in the back, half hidden behind a pile of old shoes. A small box, dusty and forgotten. Kneeling, she pulled it out, wiping the grime from the top. The box creaked as she opened it, revealing a stack of yellowed letters, each one addressed to her mother. Lily's fingers trembled as she unfolded the first one. The handwriting was shaky, almost childlike, but the words were cryptic, their meaning veiled. I can't forget what happened. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't anyone's fault, but he's still here. Her brow furrowed as she read another. The boy, I can still hear him. Why won't he leave us alone? Her breath caught in her throat. The boy. The letters were fragmented, pieces of a puzzle that didn't make sense yet. But the more she read, the more the pieces began to fit. There had been some sort of accident, something involving a child. But why hadn't her mother ever mentioned it? Why did no one talk about it? As the evening dragged on, the house felt heavier, more oppressive. The walls seemed to press in, the air thick with an unease she couldn't shake. From the closet came soft, almost imperceptible noises, like breathing. Or was it whispering? That night, Lily jolted awake again, a cold draft creeping over her skin. The closet door was open once more, but this time there was a figure, a boy. He stood at the edge of the darkness, just out of the reach of the moonlight. His face was hidden in shadow, but she felt his eyes on her. Panicking, Lily fumbled for the bedside lamp. As the room filled with light, the figure was gone. The cold remained, settling deep into her bones. Something was in the house with her, and it wasn't leaving. Chapter 4. The Past Revisited. Lily sat in the kitchen, a glass of whiskey in her hand, her nerves frayed. She hadn't slept in days, the constant tension gnawing at her mind like an itch couldn't scratch. The boy, Michael. The name had surfaced in the back of her mind after reading those letters. She remembered him now, faintly, as if his face had been buried under layers of forgotten memories. But why? Why did the sight of him, that shadowy figure in her closet, terrify her so much? The whiskey burned down her throat, dulling the edges of her fear. She couldn't live like this, haunted by a ghost from her childhood. Maybe it's in your head. That thought nagged at her, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. The house, the closet, him. It all felt too real. Ethan arrived the next afternoon, his face tight with concern. "You look awful, Lily," he said, eyes scanning the clutter in the house, the untouched boxes, and the scattered letters. "Thanks for that," she muttered, taking another sip from her glass. "Really helpful. You've been drinking?" He frowned, taking the bottle from the table. "What's going on with you?" She wanted to scream at him, to shake him until he saw what was happening. But instead, she forced herself to speak calmly. "There's something wrong with this house, Ethan. I'm telling you, there's a boy, a ghost. I saw him." Ethan's face hardened. "Lily, you're grieving. It's messing with your head. You need to get out of here." "I'm not crazy," she snapped, standing up too quickly. The room swayed for a second, but she steadied herself. "You remember Michael, don't you? The boy from the neighborhood? He disappeared when we were kids." He paused, his brow furrowing. "Michael, yeah, I remember. But what does that have to do with—" "It's him, Ethan. I'm sure of it." She grabbed her laptop, pulling up the old newspaper article she had found. "Boy missing. 8-year-old Michael Lynch vanishes without a trace." The grainy photo sent a chill through her. "He played with us, Ethan, and now he's here." That night, the house seemed more oppressive than ever. The air felt thick, charged with something malevolent. As Lily sat on her bed, the sound of doors slamming echoed down the hallway. Then came the knocking, slow, deliberate, from inside the closet. Heart pounding, she stood and approached the closet door, her breath shallow. She pulled it open and froze. In the mirror inside, a child's face stared back at her. Michael. His eyes were dark, hollow, and filled with a rage that sent icy terror coursing through her veins. She slammed the door shut, but the knocking continued, relentless. Michael wasn't just a ghost. He was angry, and he wanted something from her. Chapter 5. Ethan's Skepticism. The next morning, Lily confronted Ethan with the fear gnawing at her. She couldn't keep it inside any longer. He sat at the kitchen table, his expression tight with annoyance, as she pushed the old newspaper article toward him. "Look at this. Really look at it," she urged, her voice shaking. "Michael's not just some figment of my imagination, Ethan. You know he went missing. We were kids, but we both knew him. And now he's here. I see him. I feel him." Ethan's eyes flicked to the article, then back to her. He let out a frustrated sigh. "Lily, you're obsessing over this. This house, the ghost, it's all in your head. You're making connections that don't exist because you're stressed out." She slammed her hand on the table, startling them both. "I'm not making this up. Something happened to Michael. Something we were a part of." Ethan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You sound just like Mom. You know that?" She was paranoid for years. She thought there was always something wrong with this place, always seeing things, hearing things that weren't there. Lily froze. She hadn't known her mother had gone through that. Ethan saw the confusion on her face and continued, his voice laced with anger. "Yeah, she was always convinced there was something evil in this house, something watching her. It's like you're following right in her footsteps, Lily." His words stung, but underneath his frustration, she saw something else. A flicker of guilt, of hesitation. "He knows something. You're hiding something, Ethan. You remember more than you're letting on." Ethan's face tightened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his coat and stormed toward the door. "You need help, Lily, seriously. Get out of this house before you lose it completely." The door slammed behind him, leaving her alone in the house's suffocating silence. But the second he left, the memories began to seep back in, unbidden. The closet. She was 8 years old, playing hide and seek with Michael. She could see him, grinning, pushing the closet door open as they laughed. Then, something dark, something terrible. The memory blurred, fragmented, just out of reach. That night, Michael's ghost appeared again. This time, his form was clearer, his face sharper. He didn't speak, but he pointed toward the closet with a slow, deliberate motion. His expression was full of anguish, his eyes pleading. He wanted her to remember. He needed her to remember. But what was she still forgetting? Chapter 6. The Forgotten Memory. Lily's hands trembled as she tightened the chain on the closet door for the third time that night. Her body ached from exhaustion, her mind fraying at the edges. She hadn't slept in days. How could she, when every morning she woke up to find the chain broken and the closet door slightly ajar? No matter how tight she locked it, no matter how much she tried to keep it shut, it always opened. The house was swallowing her whole. Every creak, every shadow that shifted out of the corner of her eye felt like the house closing in on her. Michael's face haunted her every waking moment, his silent form lurking just beyond her reach. That closet was the key to everything. She was sure of it. But the answers kept slipping through her fingers like smoke. She couldn't live like this anymore. Desperate, Lily turned to hypnosis. She needed to know what she had forgotten, what Michael wanted her to see. She sat in her bedroom, alone, the hum of a meditation video guiding her into a deep trance. The air around her was cold, but she barely felt it, too focused on the voice instructing her to relax, to sink deeper into her own mind. Her heart thudded in her chest as the memories began to surface, slow and fragmented at first. She was 8 again, playing in the house. Ethan wasn't around that day, but Michael was. His laugh echoed in her mind, bright and carefree. They were playing hide and seek. She saw herself pushing Michael into the closet, giggling as she pulled the door shut. "Stay quiet. I'll come find you later," she had said, her small fingers fumbling with the lock. It was just a game. But then, she ran outside, distracted by something else. The memory blurred, jumping ahead to hours later. She had forgotten about him. The realization hit her like a tidal wave, wrenching her back into the present. Oh God. Her breath came in ragged gasps as the weight of it sank in. Michael had suffocated in the closet, alone, scared, and it was her fault. She had locked him inside, left him there. Her mother had covered it up, let the story of Michael's disappearance take hold to protect her daughter. Tears streaked down Lily's face as guilt crashed over her like a suffocating blanket. Michael's ghost hadn't come for revenge. He didn't want to hurt her. He just wanted her to acknowledge what she'd done. As she sat there, broken, the closet door creaked open once more. The cold air rushed out, but this time it felt different. Lily understood now. She had to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Chapter 7. The Ghost's Demand. Lily's nights had become a living hell. Sleep was no longer a refuge. It was a twisted prison where Michael's ghost tormented her. Each time she closed her eyes, she found herself back in the closet, the darkness pressing in around her. Michael would appear at the foot of her bed, his pale face twisted in agony, his eyes pleading. But instead of speaking, he pulled her into nightmares, where they were both trapped in that suffocating space, the air thick and heavy, just like the guilt that weighed on her heart. "Let me out," she screamed, but there was no escape. The memories wrapped around her like chains, holding her fast to that fateful day when she had forgotten him. Closet had transformed from a mere piece of furniture into something far more sinister, a symbol of her guilt and shame. Every time she saw it, every time she heard the creak of the door, she felt the walls closing in, as if the house itself was alive, feeding off her fear and sorrow. The chill in the air thickened, wrapping around her throat like a noose. Then came the night when the house truly began to feel like a living entity. As Lily lay in bed, the shadows stretched and warped. She could hear the whispers again, but this time they were clearer, more insistent. "Remember, Lily. You have to remember." She woke with a start, heart racing, and her phone rang just as she was about to drift back into the darkness. It was Ethan, his voice tinged with concern. "I'm coming over. We need to talk." When he arrived, he looked different, more worn, the weight of their mother's death heavy on his shoulders. As he stepped inside, the air felt charged, as if the house was aware of their presence. "Lily," he began, searching her eyes. "I know I should have said something earlier. I've been scared of what we might find." "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I knew something was wrong with your memory, but I didn't want to believe it. I thought it was just the grief talking." She met his gaze, the truth settling like a stone in her gut. "He's not here to hurt us, Ethan. He wants to be acknowledged. I have to face him." Ethan hesitated, doubt clouding his eyes. "But what if it's all in your head? What if it's not real?" "Doesn't matter," she shot back, desperation spilling over. "If I don't confront him, he'll never be free. We won't be free." With a shaky breath, she stepped toward the closet, feeling the pull of the dark, the familiar dread creeping in. Ethan followed, and together they faced the door that held all her guilt, all her fear. As she reached for the handle, Michael's whispers echoed around them. "Let me out." In that moment, she knew they were on the brink of a revelation, the climax of their intertwined fates. To free Michael, she had to unlock the truth that had bound them all these years. Chapter 8: The Final Confrontation. With the closet looming before them, the air thickened, crackling with tension. Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she glanced at Ethan, who stood beside her, his eyes wide with uncertainty. The house felt alive, every creak and whisper amplifying the weight of the moment. "I have to do this," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. Ethan nodded, though his skepticism lingered like a shadow. "Just be careful, okay? I still think this is all in your head. But if there's any chance he's real, we'll face it together." Taking a deep breath, she turned the doorknob. The familiar sound of the door creaking open sent shivers down her spine. Inside, the air was colder, heavy with the scent of must and memories. Michael's ghost waited in the dim light, his features sharper than before, a look of desperation etched across his face. "Michael," Lily called out, stepping closer. "I'm here. I remember now. I know what happened." He didn't speak, but his eyes bore into hers, filled with a mixture of sorrow and something that felt like hope. Closet, a prison of guilt, stood as a silent witness to her past. She stepped further inside, the darkness enveloping her, and felt a rush of memories flooding back: laughter, the thrill of hide and seek, the sudden weight of panic when she locked the door, forgetting he was still inside. In a heartbeat, she was transported back to that day. The air was thick with dread, the echoes of her own laughter taunting her. She had played a game and lost something far more precious. "Michael, I'm so sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't mean to leave you. I was just a child." As if her words broke a spell, the room shifted. Shadows danced around her, and the walls seemed to pulse with energy. Michael stepped closer, his ghostly form growing more defined. He pointed at her, then at the door, the gesture filled with an urgency she could feel in her bones. "Let me out." The pressure in her chest intensified, her guilt threatening to crush her. I can't change what happened, but I can acknowledge it. I need you to forgive me, to let go. Ethan watched from the threshold, his skepticism wavering as the air crackled with emotion. Lily, are you okay? But she was beyond him, lost in the moment, the reality of her past colliding with the present. She stepped forward, past the threshold of the closet, and felt Michael's presence surrounding her, the weight of his sorrow pressing down. I'm here, Michael, she said, her voice steadying. I'm here to face this with you. In that instant, she saw the truth. The closet wasn't just a hiding place. It was where she had locked away her guilt, and now she had to let it free. Together, they would confront the darkness, and perhaps she could begin to heal.